Hello, Star Family. You may have heard people talking about Saros Series, and you may even know it has something to do with eclipses. Today, I want to unpack Saros Series. I'd like to explain what they are and what links a bunch of eclipses into a Saros series. I want to explain how to use them astrologically at the end. So this video is thanks to Maria Schumacher. Thank you for everything you do, especially for asking good questions like what the hell is a Saros series actually? So let's start by really briefly unpacking eclipses. Eclipse happens when sun and moon are both very near to a lunar node. Lunar nodes are points where the path of our moon and the path of the sun, the apparent path of the sun as the Earth orbits it. It's where those two paths meet, the path of the moon and the apparent path of the sun. There are two nodes, one as the moon moves up into magnetic north, this being the path of the moon, and the other node, south node, where the moon moves into magnetic south. And when sun and moon are both within 18 degrees of a lunar node, eclipses happen. And the way the celestial mechanism operates, this happens about once every 6 months. We see that if sun and moon are in the same position, like if they were both around one node and we were here in the middle, that this produces one kind of eclipse, or maybe another kind of eclipse. And when the moon and sun are opposite, when they're opposite, and you have like north node over here and south node over here, produces lunar eclipses. And what we're used to seeing is total annular, let's see, this would be an annular eclipse, where there's a ring around. This would be a total eclipse where you see a corona around. A lunar eclipse that looks like a penumbral or partial lunar eclipse. And this is a solar eclipse where the moon has occluded the sun. All right. So eclipses. Yeah. Saros series is a series of consecutive Saros cycles. I'm going to put that up on the screen for sure. A Saros series. So in order to understand a Saros series, we need to start by understanding what is a singular Saros cycle. This is easy. A Saros cycle is a period of 6,585.3 days. It could be 18 years, 10 days, and 8 hours, 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours, or 18 years, 12 days, and 8 hours. Depends on the leap years within that period of time, within that roughly 18-year period. How many leap years? It's an average of 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. It's precisely, always and with no variation ever, 223 synodic months. That's from one new moon to the next new moon, or a full moon to the next full moon. Either period could be a synodic month. 223 of those. Now, for from any given eclipse, okay, we go one Saros cycle, one period of 223 synodic months, there will be another eclipse. It's one of the most ancient uses of Saros cycles is predicting eclipses. The Chaldeans used it. They were late period Babylonians, and they knew back in 800 to 500 BC, back in Babylon, that eclipses in a Saros series related to each other. So this concept goes way, way, way back. In fact, the very first computer that we know of was designed to process Saros cycles and other astronomical phenomena. And that might sound like a pretty outrageous claim, but the most ancient analog computer that we know of is known to have calculated orbits and other celestial motions. It's really cool. I have some pictures. It was an orrery. It was an orrery. Now this is an orrery. This is the simplest kind of orrery that shows the position of Earth and Moon. At any given time, you can turn a hand crank, and these gears are timed to the celestial mechanism. You can use this as an orrery. Now, the most ancient computer in the world is called the Antikythera Mechanism, and it's just the first known device of its kind. Although it's not suspected to be a prototype. This Antikythera mechanism dates to 100 to 200 BCE. It's understood to be Hellenistic or Greco-Egyptian in origin, and it's a delightful stick in the eye of the institutional narrative. But the facts remain comparable to Western European tech, circa a millennia and a half later. That's what this is. This is comparable to Renaissance technology, and it dates to 200 BC. So next to nobody learns about this in school. Not in respectable and accredited institutions of knowledge. No, we don't. We don't get to learn about this. Anyway, we actually have the manual. We have the manual or fragments of it later, carved in stone. This is a modern recreation of how the gears were timed. They think that Hipparchus of Rhodes consulted on the design of it because the gears actually use his ratios of planetary movement. Anyway, that's an aside. I was talking about the instructions. And yes, you can see here this word is Saros. It indicates the Saros cycle of 223 months. And this is the instruction manual for the Antikythera mechanism. We have it. Yeah, so look into that. Do your due diligence and check that out for yourself. So Saros series and Saros cycles have been relevant for a very long time. We haven't even unpacked what it is or why, because I'm distracted by ancient robots. So how do we conceptualize a Saros series? We know the length of a Saros cycle, 223 lunar months. Synodic months, very roughly 18 years. That's a single Saros cycle. A whole Saros series, start to finish. Now, a series of Saros cycles typically lasts 12 to 15 centuries, 1200 to 1500 years, and it contains around 70 to maybe 90 eclipses. Now, the exact duration and number of eclipses in a Saros cycle varies due to the elliptical orbits of the Earth and the Moon and just the way eclipses work. But first, let's understand an important point that Saros series, the series of Saros cycles, this 12 to 1500 year process, they have a beginning and they have an end. And you have to understand that in order to understand what a Saros series is. So let's look how that works. All right, so here we are, and we're examining frames of eclipses. And these are all of the eclipses which comprise a single Saros series, Saros Series 136. Now, that's an astronomical designation. And the astrological designation, like if you were to look up Bernadette Brady's the eagle and the lark in her Saros data, this is called 11 South, Saros 11 South. That's the astrological determiner. you can see that at the South Pole, here we have Australia, India, and at the South Pole in 1360, there was an eclipse that was the first eclipse in this Saros series. And now, if you're thinking about how the moon and the sun move apparently through the sky, and as they approach a node, they get closer and closer to it. And this is how it starts when the moon or the sun or both are about 18 degrees away from a node. There's another eclipse in 1378. You'll notice about 18 years later, 223 synodic cycles. And here's Antarctica. We don't see India or Australia. We see Southern Africa and Southern America. In fact, you can see all of Africa. And what you notice is that the area of coverage, the area of affect of this eclipse is bigger, and then it's moved a little bit off the pole. And we take it to the next one, and 18 years later, we're back in the Australian region again. But what happens is, starting at one pole, we have movement up over time, and then when we scroll up to like the middle series of so this is 2009. When did this start? 1360. So that's as 800 years later. We're about halfway through it, and we're seeing paths of totality. We're seeing full-scale eclipses right around the equatorial band where the population of Earth is concentrated. And this moves up, and in series like this, we look at a series now we're in 2063. But let's see. This is a very interesting eclipse because in 2027, this Saros series the path of totality will be exact over Egypt, which don't get me started. So, yeah, pay attention to that, August 2nd, 2027. All right, and then when we get to the end of a Saros series, what we're seeing as we approach the final frames is eclipses at the other pole. So here we're at the North Pole, okay? 1,000 years later, 1,200 years later, there's Canada, and we see these series of eclipses sort of get smaller as they approach the pole, and less of an area of shadow is actually affected. And this is the last in the series of eclipses. Yeah, the very last. Not quite exactly at the North Pole, but this one ends up in 2622. This is the last. This is the last eclipse in this Saros series in 36. So we're back here, and we'll look at this. We'll start it, and we'll just animate it like a second a frame. And this is how eclipse patterns move over time, over grand periods of time. And this is how a Saros series starts and ends. And between each one of those frames, in between each frame, is a Saros cycle. So we have almost 1,300 years of data, and you can see it move up. You can see it move up from one pole and kind of snake its way around the globe with the big annular and total eclipses in the middle, and wind down to the other pole with penumbral, or just a shadow eclipse. Not really a full occlusion, but you're just catching an outer shadow. And now we get to the part of the video where I want to talk about the astrology of it all, because here is Bernadette Brady's data on Saros Series 11 South. Her idea, and I think it's a very good one, is that each eclipse in a Saros series is going to have a personality. It's going to have a temperament and a flavor. It's going to act to produce a certain intention, and the intention is embedded and coded in the astrology of the nativity of that Saros series. So we take the first eclipse, remember 1360, June 14th at the South Pole, and we look at it. And now Brady's a tropicalist, so she sees this as happening in Cancer. I mean, her redeeming virtue is that she focuses on aspects almost exclusively. She doesn't talk about Cancerian artifacts. She talks about artifacts of a Mars-Pluto conjunction and Uranus on the midpoint of Mercury-Venus. And she interprets this family of eclipses as concerned with the need to make sudden reforms. Old ideas or methods will fail, and new systems are required to deal with the events brought by the eclipse. As a consequence, the person will need to think of new ways of handling the issues. Any blocks could be violently or tragically removed, a la Mars-Pluto conjunction. Also, if you're really paying attention, disregard this data about when it ends, because she missed the last one in the series. Like we saw an eclipse in 2622, and she ends it on 2604. Seems to be her error. She makes them. We all do. And please do disregard the tropical data. No disrespect to tropicalists out there, but aspects never lie. You know, from sidereal to tropical to constellational, aspects always stay the same. And here, when we consider Brady's prognosis, let's take a look at the charts themselves. So Brady says upheaval, violent change. And here we have data about a path of totality over China on July 22nd, 2009. It correlated very precisely to the Uyghur riots in China, and late 2009, during that 6-month eclipse cycle, that for China was a period of great policy reform. It's not always that cut and dry, but the eclipse in 91, the eclipse in late 91 saw the dissolution of the Soviet Union in the following 6 months, and it didn't have anything to do. I mean, the path of totality was over Mexico, but it did happen to see the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And when we go back to 1973, June 30th, the Yom Kippur War in Egypt, Syria attacked Israel, and the U.S. and USSR almost went to war over it. If for the old heads in the audience, we were at DEFCON 3 over this. And the Middle East petrol organization OPEC started to put an embargo on U.S. oil here. So it's pretty major changes. Take it back to 1955, violent social reform, denounced the communist campaign. That was in Vietnam. Stalin's Great Purge happened 18 years before. I think you can see some pretty interesting correlations between Brady's prognosis and the unfolding of history. So when Brady talks about Saros Series 136, she calls it 11 South. She's looking at the first chart as a natal chart, like you would look at the temperament of anything. Brady looks to the Saros as like a thing, a bounded thing, a discrete thing, a thing with a beginning and an end, so we can understand the astrology of it. And then, just to throw this out there, we can always cast these charts ourselves. Like here's 14th June, 1360, South Pole. To cast a chart at the South Pole, just zero out the west-east, the latitude and or longitude and latitude, make 90 south for the South Pole, 90 north for the North Pole. You'll see it's going to produce some pretty wonky effects. The midheaven is actually at the descendant. It's what happens at the poles. How systems decohere. I would add to Brady's observations that Pluto and Mars conjoin on the fixed star Hamal. It's a very pugnacious and a forceful influence when Mars and Pluto are here. And they trine Saturn. Roughly 0 degree. We have a Pluto-Saturn trine of 42 arc minutes and a Mars-Saturn trine of 51 arc minutes. Mercury and Venus also, if you'll remember, Uranus sitting on their midpoint was Brady's major observation. They sextile very precisely at 00.00. We can see here that that's an exact relationship. So there's more than just destruction and change and upheaval here. There's artfulness, there's skill, there's craft, there's subtlety, and in that is captured within that arc is described the ability to change, the ability to adapt, if you will, to these Pluto-Mars effects. Brady also picks out those powerful features, though, minus the Saturn trine, but I'm not going to try to make interpretive observations there. We have Eris opposite to Ceres. Now we're getting into territory Brady never explores. We have the archetype of chaos pitted against the humanity and interconnectedness of Ceres. Eris and Ceres both T-square the lunar nodes, signifying great potential to disrupt feelings with chaotic activity. So I would agree with her assessment on this one. Sometimes I see totally different stuff than Brady sees. I would say, it's a mix of upheaval and painful change, and dealing with it artfully, dealing with it skillfully. But I give all this like as an example, just an example of like how to look at a Saros series astrologically, how to use them for yourself if you want to, and just so that you understand the logic, it's just a birth chart. We're looking at the first eclipse and we're saying the first in any series is an omen, and we take this omen and apply it to the series. That's a time-honored practice from beyond the boundaries of culture, and no particular one has any license on that idea. So my friends, that's today's video. I hope that it brought you some understanding of Saros series, the Saros cycle, and just seeing how even across centuries and millennia, how the original impression, the novel effect of something, its nativity is then carried and encapsulated in its manifestation through time. It's a very interesting principle of astrology. And with that, close this video. Bless you all, and I'll see you next time.